Hey, welcome back to the Cruise Elite Podcast. I'm Taylor, and I'm here with Tony. What's up, Tony?
What's up, Taylor? Happy Monday to you.
Yep, happy Monday. It's snowing.
It's
right?
snowing.
It's snowing here, yeah. It snapped cold on us. It feels like winter now. We're having like 26-degree mornings.
So I'm just imagining you just getting all excited for fishing in the cold.
Sorta. I mean, I do love fly fishing in the winter, but I got to wait till January for the season to open. And then by January, I have to get really motivated. And then I have to find the right conditions so that I don't, die in the cold. But yeah, I'll definitely get out there a few times anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. 26 degrees in the morning. I feel bad for all the folks that work out in their garage when they first wake up at 5 a.m. or whatever.
That was like me last year before we moved. The little gym room that we use for working out, the first 2 years that we had it, there was no heat. So it was brutal. And then we got like a little splitter back there, but still it took forever to heat up. And it never actually really heat up very well because the floor was so cold. But yeah, all the social media content that I shot for the first couple years of living in that place,
yeah,
people don't realize it, but it was like during the winter, there were times where I was shooting content back there and it was like 18 degrees. It was brutal. And you'll see me barefoot in every single video.
So here's a neuro question. I notice when I'm cold, I tend to have more little like pain stuff, more like carpal tunnel-y stuff, like vibration bothers me more.
Yeah.
Let me ask, is cold a form of threat and your body perceives it as like part of the threat bucket paradigm?
Boy, I'm sure we could unpack that a lot, but so there's going to be a lot of factors to it. I think definitely what you just described is relatively common. I feel like I'm the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it definitely can be somewhat threatening. I think a lot of times too, the weather that comes with the cold can sort of change like autonomic function a bit. Like you can be sensitive to weather basically. And like, I know for me, it's so weird. When it gets cold, if it happens to be really windy, I'm affected more negatively by wind than I am just the cold. But the two together, I feel a difference. I feel that negatively affected me sometimes. But
Yeah.
I do think there's probably quite a bit of neuro involved in that. It's hard to say what specifically, but yeah.
Yeah. I would love to go down that rabbit hole at some point.
That would be a good one.
But today there's an entirely other rabbit hole for us to go down.
Yep.
Today we're going to talk about tracking. And this is going to be kind of an open-ended conversation because tracking can mean a lot of things. I think it's useful to talk about like biometric data, heart rate, blood pressure, even stuff like that, but also just like old school manual tracking that people might do, like tracking their workouts or tracking their calories or their macros.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about tracking because on the one hand, it seems like it's all the rage. We have all sorts of devices, Fitbits and Garmin's and, pulse oximeters that you talked about that people use for tracking to inform their training. And we also have this idea of interoception,
right,
that we've talked about in the past, which is sort of you being able to interpret your own body's signals and the tension between those two things, like looking externally at data versus,
right.
looking within yourself. So with that said, I just kind of wanted to start with what are some of the things that you find useful to track, both either for yourself or also for your clients?
Okay. So I guess we'll start with kind of clients. So with a client, if I'm helping them deal with like a pain issue, I definitely want to start to get them to be more aware of the pain that they're experiencing. And so we'll scale that. And of course, it's quite subjective based on the individual and pain because it's very unique to the person. The pain experience that you have is much different than the one I have, even if we have similar issues going on. So it is quite subjective, but it is something that I'll have clients track a little bit, because a lot of times people know they're in pain, but they've never taken that extra step to be able to scale it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a trap that people need to know about if you are living in chronic pain. What happens with people that are living with chronic pain is that they just start to, in essence, become their pain. And because it's affecting so much of their life, and if you don't have a scale for what that pain is and maybe how it changes based on different variables in your life, it sort of becomes very overwhelming. And you end up kind of feeling like my pain is a 10 no matter what. It's just a part of me. It's just there and it's just intense. So tracking pain can kind of get people to take an extra step to become a little bit more conscious of, where is their pain on a scale of 1 to 10, and then having them kind of become more aware of when their pain shifts for better or worse. And then it kind of leads to some interesting conversations that help us understand what things in their life might be actually helping them change their pain experience, whether it's better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so pain is actually a useful thing to track, for sure, when you're trying to get out of pain. But it's interesting because there is a couple of things that come to mind that it can cause kind of some confusion sometimes, because there's a type of client that is dealing with a lot of interoceptive deficits, if you will. And one of the things with people that have had a lot of interoceptive deficits going on is they sometimes become hyper aware of certain parts of their body, hyper aware of certain autonomic functions like breathing, or even being hyper aware of their own heartbeat. And when you're working with somebody like that, sometimes bringing more awareness to their internal body
Mm-hmm.
can actually be problematic for the process. So in other words, I tell our students, because we've been talking a lot about the insula lately, because we just covered it on one of our neuro dojo calls with our students. And so these conversations come up. And I tell our students, you have to be careful with that person that is so interoceptively aware. We would call it kind of hyper aware. You have to be careful how much you ask them. So how does that feel? Like every time you do a drill or something and you're trying to improve movement quality and decrease pain, the more you ask them, how does that feel? The more you drive their attention inward. And there's usually a threshold to that before it kind of backfires. So you do have to be careful if you're sort of the hyper aware type of person that has a lot of those insular health history things. But generally speaking, I do think it is useful to track pain, because for chronic pain clients, part of the overall process is breaking the cycle and bringing conscious awareness to when something shifts. Because the way the brain works is, when you have a breakthrough, if you can prove to your brain that you're capable of one pain-free repetition, or maybe a repetition that just feels better than it did before, even if it's not pain-free. If you can do that and bring conscious awareness to it, that's key. Because a lot of times in the chronic pain cycle, because we kind of get stuck in this this fight or flight state, people don't take a moment to bring conscious awareness to that. And it makes it hard. It makes it quite hard to break the cycle. So there's some nuance to it a little bit, but generally speaking, I like tracking pain.
Yeah. And what does that look like practically? Like, is someone keeping a journal? Are they noting their pain all throughout the day? Are there certain times of day you want them to note it? Is
Yeah.
there a scoring system? Like, Walk us through
To-
specifically what's happening.
Totally subjective, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, right? And it sort of depends on the individual. If somebody was dealing with a lot of chronic pain, I may have them keep track of that, and I may be interested in, like, okay, what's your pain levels when you wake up in the morning? Because that can kind of be a baseline. What's your pain levels when you go to bed in the evening? Because some of the more important questions that I ask people on a history intake is, how do you feel in the morning, and how do you feel later in the evening? Because there's some interesting, you know, answers that we might get from people that give us clues to what they might have going on. So just to give people an idea, if you wake up in the morning feeling lousy, right? You have achy body, pain symptoms, whatever you're dealing with. Wake up in the morning feeling that way, but then as the day progresses and as you move more, you generally feel better. That is more indicative of needing activation. So more like neurologic, right? You might be dealing with more neurologic type pain stuff, and by giving you enough of the right activation, we can resolve that. Somebody who wakes up in the morning feeling relatively rested and they feel okay, but then as the day progresses, they start to feel worse. That is more indicative of a metabolism that is failing them. And yes, there could be some neurologic things involved in that, because sometimes with people that have more concerning vision and vestibular threats, when those higher order systems become fatigued out, you could see a crash in the afternoon or evening where now their pain levels are increasing because their nervous system is just overwhelmed and fatigued out. So that is a possibility. But more often than not, it's a metabolism that is failing the person. And so they're having fuel issues and then pain output issues. So we can ask those questions and it gives us some clues. So for me, if I'm working closely with somebody and we do want to track pain, I might be interested in, hey, how do you feel in the morning when you get up? Let's keep track of that for a little bit. How do you feel in the afternoon/evening when you go to bed? Because that might be good baselines for us.
Yeah. Yeah. What about tracking pain like during training?
Yeah. So I definitely encourage people to keep track of that if they're dealing with a pain issue and they're exercising. I think that is important. That's sort of when we lean on, basic range of motion testing, just testing a movement that might cause discomfort or pain, just to make sure that you're not exacerbating something. Hopefully what you're doing using our philosophy is getting yourself into the sweet spot where you actually feel better throughout the training session, where pain will generally decrease, your performance will increase, and you're kind of keeping tabs on that as you exercise to make sure that you're not going into a place where now you're getting diminishing returns. And that's why we might use some of those basic assessments that will tell us that. So I do think that's important. I have worked with a lot of people that have to unlearn the no pain, no gain type of mentality when exercising. That's a thing that many of us have kind of been taught over the years, and so it is definitely important to bring conscious awareness to what kind of pain are you feeling going into a training session, and then what is your experience with that as you move through the training session.
Yeah, because when we talk about assessments, a lot of times it really is an in the moment practice,
Right.
and that's by design, right? Because your neurological system responds instantly, usually, to
Exactly.
these changes. But is there a benefit to looking at that data over time? Like if I had a notebook and I was tracking, if I'm a power lifter and I'm doing squats frequently throughout the year, is it worth looking back at that data and are there clues to be gleaned from that? Or are you really just interested in how does it feel today, right now?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely benefit. It sort of depends on the person and what their goals are, because some people just don't care, and other people need the data and they need to see, the graph trending in the right direction in order to stay motivated. So I think a lot of the tracking in that sense with our fitness, like our general fitness and If we're an athlete, competitive athletes, obviously like to see that graph trending in the right direction. So I think there's definitely a case for that if you're a competitive athlete. For general fitness people like myself, I think it just depends on the goal. But tracking your progress over time has a lot of value. I mean, it can show you trends in how your training's affecting your body. You could even track specific qualities if you had something that was interesting to you that you were working on, whether that's strength based or even balance. We could look at balance in the long run. Mm-hmm. And for me, thinking about like the neuro side of it, I actually like to look at coordination in the long run. Is kind of an interesting one for me. So like when I'm working with one-on-one clients and we do cerebellar testing, which is just a kind of a whole flow of coordination assessments. They're very fast, rhythmic tests like tapping your foot, tapping your hand, touching your index finger to your nose and another target, and doing something that just requires a great deal of rhythm and accuracy. I like looking at those over time because even though I know the nervous system is responsive in the moment, in the end, we really are going for plasticity, right? We want to see permanent changes take place in these different qualities. The cerebellum being a really high order system that is very metabolically involved, when we can see changes in coordination over time, that's a very exciting thing because it means that we're improving the health of your brain. So for me, I like that. I'm always testing my clients' cerebellar tests. Granted, it is something that I could take a video. At this point in my career, I really don't need to. I have the eye for it. But if somebody wanted to, I would encourage them to take a video so that they could, compare and see what their coordination was like.
So when you say like looking at it over time, are you writing something down? Or are you just going by memory?
For me, working with my clients at this point, I literally can do it by memory.
Yeah.
Early on, when I was like really getting into this stuff, I took a lot of videos, and I really enjoyed comparing them. It was very exciting. I think I learned a lot from it. Right now, because I don't have a lot of one-on-one clients, I sort of like, I'll take a few people, work with them for a fair amount of time. I get very familiar with their function. And, when they show up and we start running some basic assessments, I'm pretty familiar with what their assessments looked like. So, but yeah, taking video is great. If you want to track your own coordination assessments, I think making those comparisons works quite well.
Yeah. So in some instances, maybe the tracking is more an educational tool for the coach.
Yes.
To get better at these assessments.
Oh, no, without question. That's a good point. Yep, that's a good point. Because I did a lot of that early on. And you just made me think of something too that I have used in the past. There's an app for this, and I think it's called the Finger Tap app. Okay. And it literally is an app on your phone, super simple. When you bring up the screen, it's basically a circle in the center of the screen, which is a button. And what they instruct you to do is put your palm. So you put the phone down face up on a flat surface, and then you put your palm down on that surface so that it's touching it. And with one of your fingers, and you can do any finger that you want, you begin to tap the screen as many times as possible in 30 seconds or a minute. And the app will count how many times you made contact with the button. And I used to use this quite a bit with some of our athletes because I wanted to know the function of their, like the performance of their cerebellum throughout their season, right? And what I did, and I'm thinking of one person in particular, is we used the Finger Tap app to actually compare with their HRV scores. And because they were keeping track of, they have, I forget what they were wearing. It was
Garmin, maybe.
It was either that or there's another one that's a ring. I think it's a ring that you wear, something like that. And anyways, I personally don't know very much at all about HRV, but my athlete liked to use it. And so we liked to incorporate what we're seeing there in with some of these other things. And the Finger Tap app was neat. And I found it to be incredibly accurate, which is so interesting because all it is tapping the screen as many times as you can in a minute. And what you would see is, and for me, looking through this neuro lens, I was looking at it as a cerebellar assessment. And as I said before, the cerebellum is very metabolically involved. So your coordination is a very good indication of how healthy you are in the moment, your fuel capacity, performance, right? So you might tap this thing, and I forget what kind of scores we were getting. Obviously, they were high because you're going as fast as you can, but you would see changes in tapping speed up to like 15 taps ish on so 15 less taps, let's say, on a day where the athlete would generally say, I'm feeling pretty tired today. I don't feel like I'm on my game today. And we would line those up and compare them to some of the HRV scores and stuff. And it was interesting. Everything really did look like it was, for this person anyway, like it was pretty accurate, with the HRV too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And for those listening, they probably know more than we do about it, but HRV, I think, stands for heart rate variability.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like the difference between what your peak and your resting heart rate might look like.
Yep. And that's about the extent of what I understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And I did that same test too with another client for quite a while who is living with MS. And so for her, like on that side of things, so the first person I was talking about was a professional athlete, but I was using the same exact test with someone of the general population with MS, and that was quite useful too, to kind of see where her performance was during her week.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so I have a Fitbit, and one of the things it does is it gives me like a readiness score, and I don't know what that all entails. I think it has to do with how much sleep you got, and then some heart rate stuff probably. I wonder if the tap test could serve as a readiness score for anyone, right?
So that's what we called it, a readiness test.
Really?
When we used it, yeah, we called it, and I do believe it could be. I found it to be very accurate. I found that athletes with a lower score were more unrecovered, and they were also they were having moments where they knew they could have done better with their nutrition, and I saw that a lot. So this particular athlete I was thinking of would always say, I've got some low finger tap tests right now, and I've been on the road traveling a lot, and I definitely haven't been able to fuel myself the way that I prefer to. And I would see those connections a lot.
Yeah.
So for them, it was like a nice reminder.
And I'm also even thinking about like the person working from home that gets fatigued from computer work or visual, strain or whatever. If the tap test might show kind of when they need to, take a break, refuel,
possibly
do something else.
Yeah. Cerebellar tests do fluctuate, right? They do. Any of those assessments that we run that are on pretty high order things.
Yeah.
The other one that comes to mind is breathing.
Okay.
So breathing assessments, when I think about all the stuff that I do the most tracking of long term, breathing's probably sitting at the top. And the reason is it's so easy to measure. See, some of this stuff I do with the vestibular system and the visual system, there's ways to measure that. I just don't have them, right? So I'm the personal trainer doing applied neurology, which is very different from the functional neurologist in a clinic with lots of technology doing, applying neurology. And so there are ways you can measure that stuff very precisely. I just don't have that technology, and it's just not really what I do. So for me, I can test coordination quite easily, right? That's easy. And breathing is very simple to assess too, because we have several different breathing assessments that we run, and it's really simple. You just time yourself, your score in seconds. Yeah, how many seconds whatever we inhale for, exhale for. We've got some different assessments. Functional inhale and exhale are the ones I'm thinking of. And we even have kind of a breath holding assessment where you exhale, hold your breath, and it's how many seconds can you basically not breathe without building up signs of startle and stress. you know? And so we can easily measure that just because you can use a timer. So breathing assessments are a really good one for me. And if I am working very closely with somebody and I know they need a lot of respiration work, I'm definitely keeping track, like literally writing down the number of seconds that they can functionally inhale or exhale for, or do the breath hold test for, because that stuff will change over time.
And what is that telling you?
So that is something we would do if we were working with somebody that needed a lot of CO2 tolerance work. So I think going way back to one of our kind of early podcasts, we did some stuff on breathing. We talked about CO2 tolerance, and basically in a nutshell, when I'm working with somebody that I know has other fuel issues and metabolism issues going on, breathing is one of the things that I can do for them very easily and right away, that will then obviously be paired up with lifestyle changes and nutritional changes. But by improving somebody's CO2 tolerance with certain respiration work, we are essentially helping their body circulate blood better, right? Kind of the end goal of that is better blood circulation, better endurance, better performance. So when we do a lot of CO2 work, we generally see a lot of improvements in those cerebellar tests that I was talking about, and the breathing assessments will improve. And so it's fun to track those over time, because it's good for buy-in too, because breath training is quite boring, right? Hard to get somebody invested in it. It can be hard. It can be stressful. And so seeing the numbers can also help people stay motivated to improve.
I think you've said multiple times now that tracking can actually help with behavior modification, which is the hardest job of any coach, right?
Yes.
You've said before. When you have a client that is having a hard time making changes, lifestyle changes, or just whatever it is that you think they should be doing, if they're not doing it, do you ever just track like consistency for consistency's sake, or just like anything like that?
Well, so yes. It's funny, I'm sort of chuckling because at this point in my career, I don't work with somebody who's not motivated, right? It's just come to that. And generally the people who are seeking me out, I don't run into those issues as much as I used to. When I had our brick and mortar studio where Alicia and I were doing all of our one-on-ones, we saw a lot more difficulty with behavior change, right? And it was actually a lot of difficulty. It was very challenging. And we actually tried to shift our business model a little bit to assist people with that, where we opened up our studio more frequently to people, and sometimes even did shorter sessions, but more frequently, to try to accommodate that kind of person, which for some people was quite good, right? They could get themselves to the appointment, right? And if it were, if it were me or Alicia waiting for them, they could do that. But when it was time to do it on their own, right? Not as easy. It's kind of like this podcast, Tony. I know you're here waiting for me to do this podcast. If Tony wasn't here, I probably wouldn't put out as many podcasts. So that's one of the benefits of working with Tony. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think there's something to be said for tracking for consistency. Absolutely. One of the things we do and have done inside our community where our programs live is that people have the option to track, right? And it actually gives you, within the app, it gives you a percentage of how consistent have you been with your workouts.
That's
right.
Great.
So, and I'll tell you, some people love that, and without that, they won't do it. And other people absolutely hate that, and they won't even hit the button. And I have people all the time tell me, they're like, "Hey, just so you know, I do my workouts, but I don't hit the button." Like, it's so funny. And it's like, well, why don't you hit the button? It's just one extra step, and they won't take it. Right. And then you have other people that if we didn't, so because we've surveyed our community on this, because we've been back and forth on whether or not we want to keep the current app that we're using for our programming, because it's very expensive and there's no frills. I mean, it's okay, right? And so we've been back and forth talking to people about this, and some people love that. They love that they check off the exercises. They love the data that they get for percentage, and they're like, yeah, I got to keep that at above 80% or whatever. And then the other half of the people will not even hit the button. It's really funny.
Yeah, and I guess if you're giving individual attention to a client, you might need to push them to do the thing that they're not inclined to do,
Yeah.
Whether it's tracking their diet more closely, tracking their workouts more closely, tracking their pain, like you were talking about earlier.
Well, it's the elephant in the room, Tony. I mean, almost there's so many people out there seeking out help for fitness, for some sort of therapeutic intervention to help with pain. I mean, the elephant in the room is the fact that the business model is based around money and not the client succeeding, right? It's like, hey, by the way, when you come to me, you're going to work with me for 60 minutes because that's what you do. But we actually know that a 60-minute session might not even be appropriate for, I mean, I've had tons of clients in the past that crash at 30 minutes, right? And that's why Alicia and I experimented with our business model early on to try to accommodate some of that. It's the elephant in the room is that, everybody generally is okay showing up for the appointment, but as soon as it's time to do things on their own, it's a totally different animal.
Yeah.
It's challenging.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you also touched on this earlier with pain. You might also be encouraging your client to not track certain things that they're maybe obsessive about or, really focused on, right? Like if someone's super, super focused on their pain,
yes,
that could be a problem. If someone's super, super focused on every calorie that they're eating, right? That could be detrimental to the goal.
It could go the other way, no question.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
I keep bringing up diet, so I think it might be worth discussing. Do you find utility in tracking diet at all? Macros, calories, anything like that?
Yes. So for sure. But so for me, I think there is great value in having somebody, and this is all assuming that somebody does not have a history of disordered eating. Obviously, if that's the case, you're better off working with a professional who can guide you in nutrition, that is a specialist in that, to, help a person who needs that extra support so that they don't go too far the other way. So I'm talking about somebody who wants to start getting healthier. They want to make these lifestyle changes. They don't have a history of disordered eating necessarily, and they want to start shifting their diet. There is almost no way to know what you're actually eating if you don't track it temporarily. And so this is where I stand on this right now. I like encouraging the right person to track, usually starting, it's very simple, really. It's more macros. It's, track your calories for several weeks. Track how much protein you're getting. How much fiber are you getting? What is your carb intake? What is your fat intake? Do this for several weeks or more as an educational opportunity, because the average person does not know how much energy is in a food, right? You just don't. You don't know how much protein's in a food. For me, because most of the clients I have worked with over the years all have been accidentally under eating protein. Okay, it's chronic. I mean, I honestly can't think of a client that didn't come to me and had their protein in check. And they weren't tracking, right? So they didn't know. And they might be putting in additional effort, but they still weren't hitting the mark. And some of these folks had under-eaten protein accidentally for 30 years. That's not good. That's really not good. So all of a sudden you encourage somebody to track, and it's not this obsessive thing that sometimes people get triggered by this and they're like, no, don't don't track your calories. That's bad. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not bad. It's educational. It's data. It really helps you. Because I did track my macros for quite some time around like high school and college, my competitive athletic career. And I was very interested in how much protein I was getting. I was always trying to eat enough protein. And so I had to track in order to learn what foods had good protein content. I needed to know like what was I actually getting? And had I not done that, I'd be very confused. I wouldn't understand now, you know, the basics that I know, kind of that I just know. Like when I eat, 3 or 4 eggs, like I generally know how much protein I'm getting. And you have to have a tracking experience to really learn that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a place now where I think for the right person, it's a really good educational opportunity, but I don't think it's necessary to continue long term. That is where I want to intervene at some point and say, get your education, understand what it feels like to eat maybe this many meals in a day, to get an idea of what your balance of macronutrients that helps you feel the best, what that is. What kind of foods do you like? What do you feel are your high payoff foods? Because we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in a minute, but like how you feel from eating certain foods is also something really worth tracking for several different reasons. I'm sure we'll get there. But doing this temporarily and then stopping is really the idea over time, because you want to empower the person and you want them to get that education so that they can continue to make smart decisions about their nutrition ongoing throughout their life. That's the goal. And that's the problematic piece about following a diet that is so clearly mapped out for you that it becomes a math problem
Mm-hmm.
instead of an exploratory experience that teaches you what things feel like. If you are super dependent on a diet that's so mapped out for you, here's your 5 meals a day, this is the calorie, content, and you don't really even need to look at that. Well, what happens is you end up like me, who didn't really do math without a calculator,
Hmm.
and now I can't do math. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm dependent on that calculator. So that's where I stand with that. I find it to be a super valuable tool to a point. And then it's time to learn how to eat sustainably and have at least a basic understanding of what you're getting.
Yeah, and it sounds like this might apply kind of across the board, where your focus for tracking seems to be on educating the client on themselves, right? So like the
Right.
interoception and pain conversation we had at the very beginning,
Right.
you could view through a similar lens. It's like we want you to be aware of your pain and when it how intense it is and when it's happening, so that you're more informed and can guide your process. But
That's
we
right.
don't want you to be so focused on your pain that it's all you think about and it's actually making it worse.
Right. That's right.
So back to food.
Yeah.
You said something really interesting, and that is you don't just want to track your macros and your calories necessarily. You might also want to track how something makes you feel.
For sure. And this might be something that we do even before we recommend tracking macros.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, well, it depends on the individual, but and what we're working on, but a food log for, how do you feel after consuming whatever food you have, unbelievably valuable. You wouldn't, it's incredible. I was thinking of one person in particular. I told this story not long ago, actually, on to our students on a call when we were talking about interoception, because one of the best things you can do as an interoceptive drill for somebody that is more unaware of their internal body is have them keep a food journal so that they can learn, okay, this is how I felt after eating breakfast. What was in that breakfast? It's like, okay, 3 eggs, piece of toast, whatever. How do you feel, let's say 20 minutes after the meal? We had one client in particular who I was working with on the training end of things, and Alicia was doing some work with her more around nutrition. And this was an athlete that really needed a lot better interoception. There was a lot of disconnect between her and this part of her, right? Physically, good athlete, moved well, but lacked that interoceptive sense, that self-awareness. I think it can be different for different people, but a long story made short is one of the things that this female athlete had dealt with over the years was that she had lost her period. And perhaps it was intense training over time, right? It's hard to know exactly what it was from, but we knew that interoceptively this person was struggling.
Hmm.
And Alicia did a food journal with her. And it was incredibly educational for her because she had never taken a moment to actually understand how she felt. And one of the biggest questions that we ask with interoception is, well, how do I feel? Ask yourself, how do I feel? Some people do this naturally. Some people might do it to a fault. Some people might not do it at all, right? So there's balance with this idea. But this athlete had never had an experience like that. And it was incredible what it did for them. And the victory of the whole experience was that her period returned. And this was before retirement. So she was still training. And so because of all of this improved interoception, it's likely that she had some good hormonal shifts in her favor that helped her menstrual cycle return.
That's fascinating.
It is.
And so, instead of taking external cues and saying, okay, well, you need X amount of this, of fats and X amount of this micronutrient or whatever it is, she took internal cues and just said, how do I feel when I eat? And I'm going to follow that. And
you said the magic words.
Improved.
You said the magic words, internal cues.
Yeah.
That's what it is. We take it for granted. Some people don't have them. They don't recognize them, I should say.
Right.
They don't recognize them. And it's super important. And remember, to be the best version of ourselves, we're trying to balance all these senses. So for that athlete, it was a big blurry area. Right. And so the constantly asking herself, okay, how do I feel from this? And we ended up kind of carrying that idea over into her training too, because she accidentally abused exercise. So that was a part of it too. So by becoming more aware of how does she feel from her training, am I ready for this training? Am I recovered enough? Am I just checking boxes and doing things that are too high intensity for me? It was very valuable.
Yeah. I think in fitness, but probably in general, I think we have a bit of a bias against following our feelings.
Right.
That feelings are these wishy-washy things. And it's like, oh, I don't feel like working out today, so you should just push through that, right? And that's good advice in a lot of ways. But taken to its extreme, right? If we're never listening to how we feel,
right,
that could be a missing ingredient, right? So it sounds like
think so, yeah.
With tracking, it's about how you feel, but then you can also use these other tests like cerebellar tests, breathing tests, and use that data to reinforce your knowledge of how you're actually feeling.
Yeah, and you ask yourself, how am I feeling? Right? So I've worked with so many people, one-on-one, and people inside of our community who are too afraid to give themselves permission to make a different decision than what's on their training regimen for that day.
Yeah.
They're too afraid. They don't want to carry the stress and anxiety that might come from, okay, I didn't do my training today, or I only did half of it. And I'm constantly preaching inside our community, like, guys, these workouts and these programs are on paper because they have to be, or else you wouldn't know what to do. But what comes first is, how do you actually feel? Because I want you to always have permission to change things based on what you need in the moment. And that's super key. So sometimes personally, I just skip training if I need to, if it's best for me. Maybe I just dial it back, shrink the volume a little bit, the intensity, whatever's needed. Sometimes throw in the towel and go, you know what? Today's not a good day to really do heavy strength training. I'm just going to do some mobility.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of balance work, have some fun, throw some play in there, crawling, hand-eye coordination, done.
Roll around a
Roll
little
around.
bit.
Yeah, roll around, and then I'm done. And then on those days where I'm feeling really good, I might hop right back into something more structured and, get after it with some more intensity. So it's very freeing, right? And that's important in fitness because we've been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed. The industry has brainwashed us into the no pain, no gain type of thing. And I've been brainwashed too because remember, my background is wrestling. So in wrestling, you put every single feeling you have behind you and you just go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing that's allowed in the wrestling room. And that's how it was. And you do need that skill, especially in a sport like wrestling, because, there's going to be a day where you walk out there and you feel lousy and it doesn't matter. You've
Yeah,
got
the
to,
other guy's still trying to kill
yeah,
you,
yeah. I'm getting fired up too because the wrestling season is like starting right now. So I've been finding matches and stuff to watch, Division I stuff on
Oh,
YouTube.
wow.
I'm getting
Cool.
excited. Yeah, the coverage is so much better now than it was when I was in high school and college. So now I can find stuff and it's fun to watch.
If you can send me a link, I'd love to check that out.
Yeah, I will. It's man, they're good. They're
Yeah.
good. Great athletes.
It kind of reminds me of the whole like intuitive eating thing,
Mm-hmm.
which without getting into like the specifics of it, sounds like you're kind of on board with,
Yeah.
but I think there's that important step first where you need to do the tracking that you
Bingo.
were describing so that you know what that looks like. And then you
So
can be
true.
into, and I think that that applies for training as well, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
having gone through many structured programs.
Right.
I learned how hard I could push myself or when I had gone way too far. And now I can do things more like you, where it's like I can kind of just play it by ear more and freestyle more and, undulate
100%
intensity
agree.
based on how I feel. But if I didn't have that structured training history, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know
Yes.
when I was actually pushing myself
And
or
for
when
the
I was.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for the record, I royally screwed this up in my lifetime.
Hmm.
Like the reason I've arrived at a place where I have this freedom with fitness and nutrition is because our listeners and people following did not see this from me because it was too long ago, but in high school and college I had a very poor relationship with fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And my nutrition was never terrible, but I had my moments. I say it wasn't terrible because at least I knew enough that sustenance was going to help me.
Mm.
Right. So I was consuming food and putting in the effort. I wasn't necessarily making the right decisions because I didn't know then what I know now. And I definitely had some moments where I got into some stupid diets. But I made those mistakes. And then over time, just kind of through this maturing process in training and nutrition, was able to kind of circle back and realize, oh, the highest, level and expression of good personal well-being and health and fitness is having this freedom, having the freedom to make these adjustments as you see necessary. And the cool thing that this does for me is that I never ever feel like I am in a place where I could quit fitness.
Mm.
It's like this is the pinnacle in my opinion of personal health and fitness, is that because most of my client base and students, the ones engaged in our programs, carry a lot of stress over, especially when they're first starting, they carry a lot of stress over, like, if I stop, what if I don't start again? And that's a real thing for somebody who's just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's problematic because the industry teaches a lot of industry programs, and the way we've been kind of brought up with our fitness culture is that everything's based on willpower,
Right.
and willpower fails eventually, right? So the neat thing this does for me is, through this experience and making these mistakes and giving myself this freedom, is I never feel like I'm going to quit, right? And I never have anxiety like, I'm going to give up. And it's a good feeling, and it sort of just makes like fitness is just this thing for me that's there, and I can take as much time off from it as I want, but I know I'll always be coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And I've taken some long breaks too in my lifetime. Now for me, a long break is like, you know, if I took a month off, that would be a lot. Like I would generally do something, but I might dial way back and change gears. There's been times in my adult life where I took basically like a year off or something
Mm-hmm.
like that because I just was into other things and kind of got sick of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But then as I learned to change things even more to kind of meet my desires with what I wanted to do, then that helped even more. And, I can't really see myself taking a year off.
Last episode we talked about, treating your trading like a practice.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's also a great part of that sustainability,
Definitely.
right? This isn't something because I have this goal necessarily that I have to hit in 8 weeks.
Right.
This is something I do several times a week, whatever it is,
Yep.
for the sake of doing it. And I'm curious about the process and how I feel and learning new things. And
man, it is so much more fun when you approach it like that. Just thinking back to what I was like in high school and college, like I would not miss a workout ever. And I would not even miss a workout of some kind on holidays. And it was just, for me, it was like that athlete mentality that I had been brainwashed into. And little did I know the best athletes were probably, sitting at home eating cheesecake and being around family while I was still training, thinking that that was going to get me to where I wanted to go. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, it really is always about balance.
Yeah. I think one of the most popular metrics that people track nowadays, if I had to guess, is steps.
Mm-hmm.
There's articles every week. I open my newsfeed and there's an article about how many steps you should get a day.
Yep.
And, I talked about Fitbit, but there's other fitness trackers and they all have this metric.
Right.
And I think in general, it's used as kind of an analog for activity, just overall activity, right? Like, are you moving? Are you getting your steps? How do you feel about tracking steps, activity levels in general?
Yeah. So again, I got two ways I can play this one in my mind. First, it's almost sad to me that we have to track our steps, right? Because people have become so sedentary that the idea of walking now is something that we want to count.
It's revolutionary.
It's revolutionary. It's something that we want to count to make sure we're getting, maybe a bare minimum because we're so sedentary in our lifestyle. So to me, it's kind of sad. Hopefully you don't have to necessarily count because you're just getting enough activity that you don't need to even waste that energy. That's not going to be the case for everybody. I personally don't count my steps, but my wife does. Mm-hmm. So Alicia does, and she'll tell me, oh yeah, because we take a couple walks a day, hopefully at least one, and we try to get two, and she'll be like, oh yeah, down to the mailbox and back. It's at the bottom of our dirt road. And then we have this nice long hill to walk back up. And she's like, yeah, down to the mailbox and back, or we go to the mailbox and then to the elementary school. My daughter plays for a little bit on the playground. We head back. She's like, that's 5,000 steps. So like, I kind of know, because my wife will just, clue me in on that, got 7,000 and whatever. But I personally don't track my steps. I think for somebody who's making a lifestyle shift and, they're starting a new habit, like they're trying to work walking into their lifestyle, I think it could be beneficial. I mean, it's motivational. It gives you some data over time. You get to see a trend, get to see things trending in the right direction. If you're consistent with your walking, maybe you discover you're inconsistent. It gives you a reminder to get back out there and get it done. So again, I do think that it could be valuable for some people trying to make that shift. For me and just the type of person I am, man, hopefully I'm just getting off the couch and getting out there, moving enough that I don't have to worry about counting.
Right.
No,
I agree 100%. It can be incredibly motivating.
I will add this too, Tony, is that people have to understand too, like this whole 10,000 step thing is also to sell you stuff, right? So anytime the industry makes a big to do about a metric, that the next thing, the next wave is, hey, buy this app, buy this, thing that keeps track of it, whatever it is, or buy my program, and inside the program, you're going to also keep track. So there's that too. And I'm not even saying that's all bad, but that's typically how things work in our industry.
Yeah. It'll be something else tomorrow.
Exactly.
Sure. Would you ever track activity levels and compare that to pain or how someone feels?
Sort of, but not in a super organized way.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I have a client that I think is doing too much, there is sometimes we do have to consider what can we take away versus add. This is challenging with coaching because sometimes it's actually much more powerful to take something out of the equation than to try to add several things in it, especially if you're dealing with somebody who has different habit change issues, or they have different metabolic, health concerns that are making them kind of fuel compromised. Sometimes we have to remove stuff, right? And that's always a bummer for people if it's not something that you want to remove. So sometimes I work with somebody and I'll start to get that feeling, and then maybe we have to talk about that, or we have to at least get them to think about it enough that they can make the connection for themselves that this activity is causing more harm than good. Working with an athlete who's so over devoted to deadlifting, but they do struggle with back pain. They don't want to give up deadlifting because they don't want to give up the weight on the bar. They don't want to see, they don't want to lose that strength necessarily. But every 3 weeks, they're complaining of, back pain flaring up. And maybe we have to get them to understand that some time off from that might be key because it's part of their pain cycle. That's one example in a million, but yeah.
Yeah. So you might be just looking at their workout journal and saying, okay, you're deadlifting 2 times a week, really heavy. Like maybe that's too much. Maybe you should be doing 1 time a week, or something like that.
Yeah. There could be something in their lifestyle that's flaring up their issue. Right. And it's just making it challenging to combat, when that's constantly happening. I mean, man, I've seen this happen in a number of ways that are quite challenging. I actually had a woman I was working with for several years. She had a degenerative neurologic condition, and she was driving from quite a long distance to get to our studio. It would sometimes take her about an hour in traffic, sometimes more. And the drive was basically wrecking her before the work we were doing. And that was a discovery. And so when we shifted, this just happened naturally, which is cool. But when we shifted our business online and she continued to be a one-on-one client, I was able to get more work done with her that was positive with her in her home through a Zoom call than what we were able to do in person. And she actually realized that too, because she wasn't fatigued out from the drive. So that was kind of an interesting discovery.
What about another popular, I think, metric is heart rate zones. So how much time are you spending in zone 2? How much time are you spending in, at peak zone 5 or whatever it might be? Is that something you've ever looked at or used?
So this just comes down to my own bias because I hate cardio. So I put it this way. I like what cardio gives me, but I don't like it nearly enough to track anything about it. So I'm more likely to get my cardio in ways where it's a bonus of like going hiking or doing jujitsu or even just walking right? So personally, I don't have much experience with tracking heart rate zones, but for someone, I was talking to my buddy the other night actually, who's really big into mountain biking, and he's tracking all of his zones and stuff, and that all really correlates to his goals.
Mm-hmm.
But like, man, put me on a mountain bike, and I'm going to be more about the riding and the technical part, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to care anything about my heart rate zones. But he actually has endurance goals, so with endurance goals, that kind of data I think is very useful.
Interesting. Yeah, I was sort of wondering if there was maybe a threat component to like really intense cardio, right? Like if you're doing hit stuff where you're hitting your max heart rate,
Mm-hmm.
if that could be adding to the threat bucket or
So that, in my experience, has been based on the individual, but I will tell you that I've seen that be much more threatening in a female population.
interesting.
And that's just purely my experience. So I'm not sure if there's like anything to back that up or any
Sure.
science or anything. But
Sure.
I've just seen that I've had several female clients over the years that really needed to back off on the high intensity exercise, and when they did, a lot of good things happened for them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it's the culture thing. Like the fitness culture has taught people that the more drops of sweat that go on the floor, that equals better, a better workout. And it's not the case. And you can get a lot done in a shorter amount of time. I think you don't have to necessarily do this stuff as long as people want. Again, goal dependent, because if you're an endurance athlete, you're going to be probably doing longer bouts of endurance type exercise. So I'm talking more about the general population.
Mm-hmm.
The type of high intensity work that they do is often too long. And the thing that I actually don't like about it, it's certainly healthy for you to do high intensity interval work, but we can easily make mistakes with that. But the thing I don't like about it is that anytime you put yourself in a position where your exercise is governed by a clock, what that usually means is very low quality movement for high repetition.
Sure.
And the quality of what you do just degrades more and more and more. So, yeah, if I'm going to do anything like that, I'm more of the opinion of not as long. Intensity's fine, but let's maintain the quality of what we're doing so that, we don't fall apart in the process.
Fascinating. Sleep. I don't know much about like HRV or sleep scores, but what about just tracking the hours of sleep? Because that's another, feature of a lot of these fitness watch type
I think,
products.
yeah, I think that's cool. Sleep is king, right? I mean, it's one of the most important things that we can understand for health and longevity for sure. Personally, I don't have experience tracking it with like any kind of technology.
Mm-hmm.
I have clients who have done that. It's not something I've really been interested in. I feel like I know the quality of my sleep. It's very easy for me to figure out if I had good sleep or not.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly maybe not to the type of extent that somebody who's tracking it can tell you, like I had this many minutes of this particular kind of sleep. Obviously, I don't know anything like that, but I just know how I feel, right? The next day. And I can kind of tell. So, yeah, for me, I haven't gone there yet. I'm not opposed to it necessarily. I am very interested in improving my sleep. I'm always kind of asking myself about, how do I feel based on the quality of sleep I had the night before. So I'd say if you're into those metrics and you have a way to do it, that could be useful. So I don't like having electronics around me while I'm sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
I turn off my Wi-Fi at night. I'm quite sensitive to electronics.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't like that. I would rather just turn everything off and ask myself, how am I sleeping the next day? You know what I mean? But that's just me.
I'm noticing a theme here, though. How do I feel?
Yeah.
Asking myself, how do I feel?
Right. Because I don't want to be lost. It's like I have worked with athletes where they've been looking so closely at their data from, their watches and stuff. And they're kind of lost in this whole idea of like, how do you actually feel? They really don't know, some of them. They really don't know. And so they sort of are relying on the technology to tell them how they feel. And I don't think that's a good idea in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is kind of the theme is I'd rather have that. I'd rather develop that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes tracking can help you develop that sense, but
Yes.
it always comes back to, how do I feel?
Right.
Asking yourself.
Right. Sometimes, yeah, it's well said. The tracking sort of helps you build the scale.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then hopefully we can graduate from using it.
Yeah.
In
my recent, running training, one thing I was terrible at, when I would just go like for jogs around the neighborhood,
mm-hmm.
I would just gas myself out
Mm-hmm.
after a couple blocks, like every time. And so I would like run for a while, and then I would basically need to like walk and huff and puff, and then I'd run again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this cycle. And since I've been doing this more structured training, I've had my watch, and it like pings me when I go from one zone to another.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's like, okay, now you're in moderate, now you're in vigorous, now you're in peak. And sure enough, like when I hit that peak heart rate is when I actually feel like, oh man, I need to stop soon.
Mm-hmm.
Like
mm-hmm.
I'm getting get gassed out. And so it's interesting that reinforces like, oh yeah, slow down. And now
Right.
I think I'm better at intuitively feeling my pace, the appropriate pace.
That's a
to
good
continue
point.
running.
I think that kind of thing. I think data for endurance athletes is actually very essential.
Mm-hmm.
If I was an endurance athlete, I'd be doing that myself. I've always been fascinated with I've worked with several professional endurance athletes, and I was always really impressed with how much information they were juggling
Yeah.
and
Sure.
keeping track of to understand their personal fitness and how to, hopefully peak at the right time. It was a lot of stuff. I think there's value in that. Your story resonates with me because a lot of times when we see numbers or we see something on a screen that is supposed to match how we feel, it actually can work against you. Like, for example, like if I told you to do as many body weight squats as you could in a certain frame of time, it's likely that as you're watching the clock, the feeling, the sensation you're getting back from your body about your level of fatigue could be changing very drastically based on time, where you are within the time and time running out.
Mm-hmm.
And it might work against you, especially when you then start to bring more attention inward. Mm-hmm. The more attention we bring inward, generally the more we see our performance suffer. Mm-hmm. The more attention we bring outward, usually the better. So if we do the body weight squats and I told you, okay, it's going to be as many as you can get in 5 minutes, be hard, but I didn't show you the time and I didn't show you how many squats you were doing, I bet most people would score higher.
Fascinating.
And so and I had this experience where I was doing, so sometimes I like to jump rope. And while I'm jumping rope, I do a vision exercise called visual saccades. And it's interesting. I found that I would have my timer and stuff, and I was trying to figure out like how many saccades can I get in like 2 minutes. I really need to work on this exercise, and I combine it with the jump rope because I like jumping rope. But I found that I was trying to keep track of like the saccades, and I was doing them to a metronome to kind of keep a rhythm because it's quite challenging. And I found that the more I kept track of stuff, the more fatigued I got from the jump rope. And I was like, what the heck? I can jump rope. I've always been able to jump rope for as long as I want with no problem. Like it doesn't even matter where I'm at in my fitness. It's the weirdest thing. I wish I was this good at something that mattered, like running. But I've been jumping rope my whole life, and sure.
You're probably very efficient.
I just
Your form
can
is probably
do it.
Very efficient.
Yeah, and I wish running was like that, but it's not. So, anyways, I did the same thing with no timer. I wasn't keeping track as closely, and I got rid of the metronome because that was kind of bringing me into more of an internal state. And I just couldn't believe how easy it was to skip rope. And control my breathing, and I never fatigued out. And then when I stopped and I looked at my clock, I was like, man, I've been doing this for like double the amount of time that I was doing it before. And I think, so it's interesting how sometimes seeing your metrics and where you are and then relating that to the level of fatigue you have, if that drives your attention inward to how bad you feel, you're going to go diminishing return. But a lot of athletes, endurance athletes, are endurance athletes because they figure out how to do the opposite, in a sense. Like they're building a tolerance to the feeling of fatigue. And so sometimes the data in the moment is giving them that feedback, and they're comparing how they feel to the data. And I think with a different mindset, you might be able to push yourself. And in the process, I think build a tolerance for being able to handle more of that endurance type fatigue that we might feel. So I think it could be positive for some people, but generally speaking, the more internal awareness, the worse we perform.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I can think of things like, like Bulgarian split squats or something where I'm counting the reps and I'm just like, oh, I can't get to the last rep fast enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because you're just spending all this time under tension and feels like time slows down and getting that.
Yeah. So this is, I play with certain things to keep people's attention outward. And that's a good example. So let's say you're doing Bulgarian split squats and you're just like crumbling under the fatigue. You could do something like set a visual metronome for yourself, which is a flashing light. And you could, set it to whatever tempo felt comfortable for you for a full repetition of a Bulgarian split squat. And with a visual metronome, and you're trying to time your reps to something external. So you're not as internal thinking about how much fatigue do I feel in the muscle? Yeah. Can I hold on to this weight for much longer? Those types of things. You'll be amazed. You'll perform sometimes like double.
Wow.
It's crazy. And your stamina goes up, your strength goes up, your fatigue goes down. So using external cues a lot of the time is a very valuable thing to do in our training, because in a gym context, everything's so internal. Like, do you feel the working muscles?
Right.
Feel the burn, feel the muscles, feel the stretch. Everything's about feel. And that's just not how it works in the real world, right? In an athletic scenario, if you're thinking about bracing your core in an athletic scenario, well, guess what? You're not going to be an athlete for long, because that's not okay for an athletic live situation. So it's fun to kind of play with those variables and drive attention to being more outward.
I love that it's not just black and white. Like, how do I feel is good in this context, but maybe bad in this other context.
Right.
And it's the same question. So are there any, you mentioned functional neurology. Is there any tech, like tracking tech, that is really intriguing to you that maybe you just haven't been able to use?
Yeah. So balance, I think. So balance, I feel like, is something that if I could track it more precisely, it would be very valuable. I've played with some different apps and stuff. There's actually a cool app. I forget the name of it. It was free for a while, and then it wasn't, and I kind of got away from it. But essentially, it keeps track of your sway. Actually, I think the app is called Sway, if I remember correctly. So you hold the app, in both hands, maybe centered with your midline, and then you would do a balance assessment, like our Romberg's test, where your feet go together in a narrow base. You stand up nice and tall with your arms relaxed, and you close your eyes. And when you close your eyes in a narrow stance, there'll be some level of postural sway. And if we made the stance more challenging, like a tandem stance or something, it would be a lot harder. So anyways, you're holding the phone, which gives you a measurement of how much sway is actually occurring.
Cool.
How accurate? I don't know, but still gives you a readout. That's very cool. And it's so easy for the client to use and understand and kind of have some fun with. I like that idea. And they do that at a much higher level in some clinics and labs when they're doing like vestibular testing. And I'm sure there's tons of equipment out there I'm not even aware of. but I did try it once in a functional neurology office, and they put you on a balance, like a plate, looks like a plate, and they put you in different positions, have you close your eyes. And again, it measures your sway, but it probably does it more accurately. And then it gives you a really neat readout, at least the one I experienced. It gives you a readout and it shows you lines on a piece of paper relative to a centered dot. And so the lines are kind of like around the page. And there's already on the piece of paper is kind of like a graph, and it's like semi color coded. And so if you have more lines representing your sway outside of a certain color, it gives you a score. And the neurologist knows, okay, that's good. That's not good. Or look at all these lines that are over to the right, but not over to the left. And it says, you're swaying more in that direction, or whatever, whatever it means. I think stuff like that's really cool and is very easy to, that would be very fun to work into training. Now, I'm sure it costs a fortune, and I'm likely not going to go there, because in the end, a lot of this stuff is, I'm able to get a read on it to the level that I need to, but there is another level of this whole thing that, when you start thinking about the technology that's out there.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I think this was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of neuro embedded in this episode.
There is.
If you're not careful, you could blink and miss it. But I really appreciated that, because not only did we talk about tracking, but we talked about air hunger, and we talked about balance, and we talked about interoception.
We did. You're right.
Yeah, I really enjoy these conversations.
Very cool. I'm glad you picked the topic. This is not something I would not have picked this topic. So I'm glad you pulled me into this one.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm sure people kind of can tell that I'm not a super tech guy. And so I generally don't gravitate towards that much tracking, but I kind of feel like I'm more pro tracking than I realized as we talk through this.
Yeah.
I'm actually tracking a lot of stuff. I just don't look at it as like super organized.
Yeah.
With technology and stuff, but yeah, I'm looking at some of these metrics long term, maybe more than I even thought.
Yeah. Maybe for the listeners, maybe share on social media, tag Taylor and say, or respond to the comment when he posts on Instagram or whatever. Hey, I track this stuff. I find this useful. Hey, I want to try this thing. We'd love to hear from you about this conversation and to join the conversation, right?
For sure. All right, there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Remember, we definitely want to hear from you. So let us know what's going on as you start to explore some, whatever you're doing, whatever you're picking up from the podcast. Okay, I really enjoy hearing your success stories, and don't be a stranger. If you guys could give us a 5-star review for the podcast, people have been doing that lately. It's been super helpful. So we thank you. And thank you for listening today. We'll be back soon. Peace out.